Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And the story I'm talking about today is the debut novel or novella from Daniel Greene, who is a very prolific booktuber, primarily focusing on fantasy. I've followed him for some time, and I've really enjoyed his reviews and his insight and his commentary. So, needless to say, when he mentioned he was releasing a book, I was excited. I was curious. Being a writer myself, being a student of the craft, I wanted to know, did he absorb all of the craft, all of the skills of these men and women he has reviewed for the last few years to distill it down into his own work and hopefully make a shining debut? Well, that is what we are going to find out today. And I like to structure my reviews a little bit differently if you're new here. I am a writer, so I dive a little bit deeper into things like craft, characterization, plot, structure, etc., because I find a lot of these booktubers really don't go deep enough for me to understand if I'm going to like something or not, because they don't really explain why a lot of the times. They just kind of explain how they subjectively feel about things without getting into specifics. So I'm going to do that a little bit here and hopefully explain enough to you why I gave this book the review I did. So what is the hook? What is this about? Well, we start with an inspector named Clyd, a name I am not a fan of, but I am not going to get into why. I just think it's kind of a crude and ugly name, especially for a protagonist. I feel like maybe if it was a supporting character, it might have worked, just maybe. But anyway, she is called to the scene of a murder, a very gruesome murder, I might add, of a child of a family, and she is soon joined by her husband, Samuel, another inspector, as well as Chapman. And these three people investigate the scene, and this drives them further and further into a plot that is much bigger than what lies on the surface, escalating to things of political proportions. So what did I think? Well, I usually don't talk about settings, but let's talk about the setting because I think it's probably my favorite thing about this book. It's kind of a turn of the century setting, and it's as if Sherlock Holmes met Dishonored, the video game. If you've played that, if you haven't, it's one of my favorite video game settings of all time. It has this kind of gritty, cold charm to it. I felt a lot of Dresden Files callbacks, not so much in the literal setting, obviously, but just the overall feeling of it. Which this whole thing kind of surprised me because I know Greene really enjoys the Dresden Files, but I was really expecting something to be more traditional fantasy like Brandon Sanderson. So this was a pleasant surprise. All right, next let's move on to character, my favorite topic. And unfortunately, this is one of the weakest, if not the weakest thing about this entire novel. So Clyd, when she first comes in and starts investigating the scene, she really has a commanding presence. I was really reminded of Sherlock Holmes when he enters the scene and enjoyed that. But as soon as her husband shows up, it's as if she kind of blends into the background. Not that her husband is a powerful figure or a strong presence in any sort of way. Just it's as if Greene kind of had a difficult time balancing these two characters. They're married and they love each other very much, and we are reminded of that more than once, which is kind of an odd counterpoint to the tone I think Daniel Greene was trying to achieve here. And on that note, there is a very, very severe missed opportunity, which I will get to in the spoiler sections. So if you've read the book and want to hear what my big problem was from a storytelling standpoint about that, hang out till the end. And then we have Chapman, who kind of is the character of conflict to these two. Now, I was hoping there would have been more conflict between Clyd and Samuel. There is a great moment of conflict where she actually has to pull rank on him. And I think that was really the only element of conflict between these two that I noticed. And it's really unfortunate because having two characters that just kind of love each other no matter what, there's no arguments or anything, it's just that doesn't make for a good story. And then Chapman. This is what's weird about Chapman. So there's one POV shift in this entire novel. Actually, two if you count the final chapter. But let's just say there's one for the main narrative. I believe it's the very second chapter. And we're in Chapman's head. We're in his POV. And I think it was just a way for Greene to show a certain aspect of the novel without bringing in Clyd or Samuel yet. And switching POVs is completely fine as long as you're consistent. In my first novel, I did it quite a bit, but I was consistent with it. You don't want to do it just once or twice in an entire novel. It feels awkward. It feels forced. It feels as if you could not convey what you wanted to convey through the POV character. So those are the main three. There's some other characters that show up. There's a villain, of course. But let's move on to the plot. Now, the plot here is pretty straightforward. I think the one disappointing thing, it's kind of like my disappointment in the original film Blade Runner, is that there's really no detective work done. We have these inspectors investigating things, but you never really feel like they're very clever. And this is really why I stay away from plot lines like this, because I think it's really difficult to create a compelling murder mystery. As they dig deeper, basically what happens is just the plot reveals itself to be much larger than what it appears to be, as just a family butchered. So as far as any kind of intricacies or interesting red herrings, there's really nothing to be seen here. So if you are looking for some kind of murder mystery or like a very interesting, deep, creative mystery, you're not going to find that here. I'm not a huge mystery fan. I enjoy them, but I don't look at that. That's not my primary genre of choice. So it didn't really bother me. I'm more in the character. And as I mentioned earlier, because that was the largest failing, or one of the largest failings of this book, that was really bringing things down. So I'm not going to harp on the plot too much. I feel like character is much, much more important than plot. So let's talk about probably my second favorite thing in writing and reading. That is the writing itself, or as I like to call it, the cinematography of the story. The line-by-line work, how it creates subtext, how it creates intrigue, how it creates interest, how it creates characterization. How is that done? Well, first of all, the writing style here is very simple. It's very punchy, which isn't a bad thing. However, the reason why it is amateurish, and I'm not using that word to try to belittle Daniel Greene here. I'm just trying to explain exactly what it is. There's no subtext whatsoever. There's no characterization. There were plenty of opportunities to do so, but really we never learned much about these characters other than what was at the surface level. So I think that's something you can go into this with, is that everything is surface level. There's no emotional subtext. There's no characterization that's kind of lurking between the lines that's just going to pull you in deeper and really get you to love these characters. Exposition, the bane of writing itself. Thankfully, there's not much of that. We get a little bit of expository dumps here and there. And it was kind of funny because when I first started reading the book, I was impressed at how reserved he was in that regard, considering a lot of fantasy and a lot of sci-fi have very massive exposition dumps because, you know, they've created this amazing world and they want you to know everything about it. But there were a couple times that just felt a little out of place and they were a little jarring because set against the rest of the novel, I felt like they stood out a little bit too much. But you know, again, nothing terrible. All right, let's talk about dialogue. Probably another one of the very, very low points in this book. It was very weak. There was a lot of swearing, and I think that's really, not that I mind swearing. I swear all the time, but it was almost as if it reminded me of reading a book or a story that a teenager wrote, or a young adult, or a kid even, meaning that they were having so much fun writing the word fuck and shit that they did it too much, and it did nothing. It did absolutely nothing to make this world darker or grittier. And I really think that's what he was trying to do here, is he was trying to have characters swear. He was trying to have severed limbs and blood, but that's not what makes things dark. That's not what makes things creepy or gonna gross people out, okay? And I think that's another thing I'd like to mention, is that yes, this book opens with a murder. Yes, there is blood described. Yes, there are guts described. But again, it's all done very surface level, so there is no emotional impact. There is no visualization. There's no weight to any of it. I was kind of shocked because before the book came out, I watched a few reviews of other booktubers that Daniel allowed them to review before the release. And well, I get it. You know, they were probably trying to set it in a positive light and saying a lot of good things about it. But you can't just say something's bloody. You have to show that it's bloody. You have to make me feel that it's bloody. And honestly, I didn't get a dark vibe from this. I believe the back of the book says something about, yes, existing in a world that feels like it's been clawed from the cruelest corners of Abercrombie's first law. No, I'm sorry. I know this is a book blurb. I know Evan Winter, I know you were trying to just, put a positive spin on things, but this is not even close to Abercrombie's work. And really, it comes from the subtext. It comes how you're describing these visuals, right? You need to make us feel it. You need to make the characters feel it. And another thing, there's too much internal thought. So internal thought is one of those tricky things, right? It's like in movies, they try to avoid it because it's kind of cheesy. With novels, you can get away with it, but you cannot overuse it. It is overused here in spades. It almost felt like an anime or a manga where you're hearing all of the motives and exactly how people are feeling through their thoughts, through their direct thoughts, not indirect thoughts, mind you. And it just comes off as kind of cringy, whereas those emotions and all of those feelings can be described in the text itself without resorting to direct thought. And I think this is a failing of a lot of first-time authors, is that they're worried that the reader is not going to get what the character is feeling. But every time I've thought of that in my own writing, I always remind myself that you need to give the reader credit. They're smarter than you think. So let it breathe. Let them figure it out. Just give them little breadcrumbs to figure this out. They will, I promise you. There is a lot of very contrived humor in this book. I don't like to talk about comedy too much because it's very, very subjective, but it's kind of that Joss Whedon humor, and not in a good way. Not that I really find anything Joss Whedon has ever written funny. And I know I'm in the minority on that, by the way. But it reads, what I mean by this, let me explain myself, is that it reads as though the writer is giggling behind the pages as this person writes it. Okay, it doesn't feel like it's an emergent humor. It doesn't feel like it would have happened naturally. Now, I'll just leave it at that. Like I said, it's a very subjective thing, so I'm not going to really knock it so much on the humor. As far as typos and things, yeah, there's a few of those, but that doesn't really matter to me. What really matters is the story, the characterization, the subtext, the plot, the line by line stuff, all the things that make you feel. Yes, typos, grammatical things, they can definitely stand out. They can kind of take you away from the experience, but I see those in all kinds of books, traditionally published, self-published, whatever it may be. And while there are a few here, I'm really not going to dock points for trivial things like that. So I know it sounds like I've been railing on this book again and again and again. Unfortunately, I feel like this is maybe a draft 1.5 or maybe a second draft, maybe an early second draft. I felt like Daniel Greene could have used a developmental editor. He could have used a copy editor who had a little bit more experience in pulling out the characterization from the work, really making these characters come alive, understanding character dynamics. There's so much nuance to writing that I don't think many readers respect. And so a lot of people think they can just, dive into writing and publish the first thing they do, and it's going to be perfect. And this is always a learning experience. I'm still learning. Every writer still learns. So on that note, Daniel, if you ever watch this video, I have some recommendations for you. So some great craft books that have really inspired me that I've read again and again over the years. The first one is Stein on Writing. Great book. Characterization, plotting, flashbacks, what to do, what not to do. Self-editing for fiction writers. A good chapter by chapter explanation of the tenets of writing and examples, brimming with great information. Secrets of Story. All the nuance, the subtext, all the things that you probably will not read in other craft books are right in this one. And if you want to dig deep, get some Robert McKee in you, get some story, get some dialogue, because I feel like those are the micro beats. Those are the micro bits of information that are going to help your story get better. Story Grid as well. I don't go that deep into it, but it does have great examples of, the 5 commandments of storytelling. All right, I'm going to end it there because I know you're waiting to hear my score. So with all of that said, I'm going to give Daniel Greene's Breach of Peace a 4.5 out of 10. Now, before you scream at me, before you think it got an F or an F minus, my review range is very similar to his. So, 5 being average. So I believe this book sits just, a notch right below that. I feel like this could be turned into something great with a little bit of care, with a little bit of love, a little bit of work, working with a great editor, educating yourself on the craft of writing. And honestly, I know a lot of people harped on the length of it, but I'm really finding myself enjoying short books, especially because I'm writing a lot of 1,000-word short stories. I'm appreciating the economy of words and the big stories you can actually tell in very few words. So I'm sure I'm in the minority there, but those are my thoughts on that. So should you read it? Well, this one's tough for me to recommend. I think there's really not a lot of depth there. There's not a lot of characterization. It's a very amateurish, and I'm not saying that to degrade it. I'm just saying what it is. It's the first work of a new author. But as much as I wanted this to be a fun ride, a grimdark novel, if you will, it's just not that. There's really no compelling characters, interesting conflict. If you're looking for a quick read, a light read, something that doesn't really go too deep, I think you'll find something here to enjoy. And the setting, I actually really enjoyed the setting quite a bit. Even though it wasn't fully fleshed out, which I appreciate, I'm sure that will come with later novels. It was just a pleasant surprise and kind of a sea of high fantasy. All right, well, if you'd like to see me create and not critique, check out my series Worth 1,000 Words, where I write a 1,000 word short story based on a piece of artwork without an outline every single week. And if you'd like to support the channel, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you like story-related content. Check out my live streams every Saturday and Sunday around 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Check out my books. I have 2 out already. There is a 3rd book in the hands of an editor as I speak right now. Did you read Breach of Peace? Let me know in the comments below. Am I being a curmudgeon? Am I being unfair? Please tell me. And Daniel, if you ever watch this, and I know I already said that, I'm really not trying to harp on your work here too much. I'm trying to be as constructive as I can. I want to see you succeed because I love story so much, and any new story out there is just another opportunity for me to get more enjoyment and for me to learn more things about what other people are going through, what they enjoy, what new conflicts they can conjure. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. All right, spoiler time. Let's talk about spoilers. The thing that really bothered me about this book, the missed opportunity, and this is kind of from a writer's perspective, and I'm not sure if you're a reader watching or continuing to watch right now, you're going to agree with me, but it's the relationship between Samuel and Clyd. So there is a moment where she pulls rank, they separate. It's a great moment of conflict. It's probably one of the only great moments of conflict in this book, sadly. Unfortunately, it's not used very well. So, as you know, Samuel dies. However, he dies after they make up. He dies after they say very lovingly things to each other before the final showdown, before his death. This leads us to the missed opportunity. Samuel should have died before they made up. And I know that sounds obvious, or you might be rolling your eyes right now, but think about it. One of the reasons that makes things like that so compelling is it's one of our deepest fears, right? Not getting to say our true feelings to the people we love. So if they never got that opportunity to make up, his death would have been so much more impactful. Imagine her not quite getting those words out, them not making up and kind of coming down to baseline before he died. Her watching him die would have been so much more brutal because she would have never had the chance to say what she truly wanted to say. He would have died without those words. And that would have been an extremely powerful character moment. I don't know what he has planned for subsequent books, if they're just going to be magically resurrected or not, but if he is keeping Samuel dead, then I think that is a severe missed opportunity. And I only bring this up because I feel like it was a great seed. The moment where she pulled rank was a great opportunity to make a very powerful scene, a very powerful character arc, but sadly it just didn't happen. This was one of the few chances in this book that kind of like, it really stuck out to me. I was like, oh, finally we have this wife pulling rank on a husband. That's a great character dynamic. And then it is completely squandered when we find out that he dies. They make up, that element of conflict was just thrown away, which makes Samuel's death just not as impactful in the least. It's things like that that make us feel, they make us really root for these characters or cry with them or hate them. And I just wish I would have seen more of that in this story. Thanks again for hanging out for the spoilers. If you liked the review, let me know with a like. If you hated the review, go on, give it a thumbs down, comment below. And thanks again for hanging out with me. And I will see you in the next one.